9. In this video, we will cover the last section in lesson 9, which is the selection storm warriors. Let's start. First, we will start with the main points that are going to be highlighted throughout the text. The first point is the genre, which is historical fiction. Then we will talk about the author's point of view and the characterization, or how the author uses the characters' actions, thoughts, and feelings to let the readers know more about the characters and to bring characters to life. After that, we will cover the conclusions and generalizations that you will have by the end of the text. Then the strategy that you are going to apply to the events of the story. And this lesson's strategy is how to infer and predict. Of course, all of these points are going to be covered later in details. In Storm Warriors, you will learn about Nathan, the main character, and what he really thinks about courage or about being brave, as he helped in rescuing people after a shipwreck. The readers also get to know that there are many other ways or many different ways to be courage or brave. Now let's move to the story structure. Let's start with the characters. The characters are Nathan, the main character, as I said before, Mr. Meekins, and the life-saving crew and his team, the sailors and the people on the wrecked ship. Let's move to the setting, which is the time and the place. It's in 1896 in North Carolina on Bee Island. What about the plot or the story events? The story is about a little boy, Nathan, whose dream is to become a fearless surfman with Bee Island's life-saving crew. So Nathan's dream is to become a surfman with the life-saving crew of the Bee Island. Nathan's father, a simple fisherman, he doesn't want him to risk his life saving people from shipwrecks. After that, a hurricane hits the island, and it was Nathan's chance to help the surfmen and show that he's able to do the job. As the storm rages, Nathan realizes that he may not have enough courage to do the job. As Nathan studied medical books and learned important life-saving skills, he was able to help the crew save people after being rescued from the ship. So he may not have the required courage, or he may not be brave enough as the other surfmen, but he was able to help them in his own way. Nathan then begins to realize that knowledge is as important as bravery, and there are other many ways to be courage other than being physically strong. Let's move to the genre. The story has a setting that was a real time and place in the past. So the setting of the story is a real place in the past, and it takes place in a real time in the past. The story includes realistic characters and realistic events. Characters and events are realistic, that are real. However, the author adds some made-up events and details to add to the realism of the characters, but at the same time, the author adds or includes some made-up events, some events of his own imagination, to bring characters to life and to add realism to the characters, so we can tell that this story is historical fiction. What does a historical fiction story tell? It's a story in which the events and the characters are about a real period in the past. So mainly it's a story that includes events and characters in a real period in the past. What does a historical fiction text include? It includes a setting which is real time and real place in the past. It includes realistic characters and realistic events. It includes feelings that real people could have, feelings and thoughts that real people could have. It also includes some made-up events. Not all the events in the historical fiction texts are real or must have happened, not necessarily. Realistic fiction texts includes made-up events that are added by the author to add realism to the characters. Let's start. The story starts with a background about the setting and about Nathan's dreams, as I said before, about being the surfman to help in rescuing people. And after that, the story takes place where the surfmen are on the beach and there is a wrecked ship in the middle of the sea. The sailors on the ship were able to spot or see the surfmen. They were cheering and screaming for help, and the surfmen were getting themselves ready to see what they can do to save the sailors on the wrecked ship in the middle of the sea. What is the job of a surfman? They are a life-saving crew. Their job is rescuing or saving people from shipwrecks or the destroyed or demolished ship in the middle of that sea. What do you think that it might be helpful for Nathan to study medical books? Why is it helpful, or why it might be helpful for Nathan to study medical books? Because medical knowledge is important just as bravery when it comes to rescuing people. When it comes to saving people's lives, knowledge is just as important as being brave or being courage. Actually, the first paragraph is a little bit different than the rest of the paragraphs. What do you think the purpose of the first paragraph? The first paragraph is an introduction that provides a background and to clarify the first part of the story. So it's not a part of the story, it's an introduction to the story that provides a background about Nathan's and his dreams and his family. Why is it written in bold or in dark, thick font? Because putting the introduction in bold shows that it's not a part of the actual story. It shows that, or it tells the reader that this is just an introduction before the story starts. The next page, "Man the ropes," shouted Mr. Etheridge. Now, Mr. Etheridge, one of the life-saving crew, he was asking the rest of the team or the rest of the crew to hold the ropes, and Mr. Meekins and Mr. Pooh were getting ready to go in the water in order to reach the ship and save the sailors on the ship. At this time, or at this point of the story, Nathan was watching, but he realized that he would never be able to do what these men were doing, especially that he heard them repeating their motto or repeating their words, "You have to go out, but you don't have to come back." In that moment, he knew that he would never be able, or he would never be courage to risk his life that way, and his dream had just blew away as quickly as the wind. And then he realized that his dad was right, he would never be a surfman. The Surfmen Motto. What it meant by a motto? A motto is a word, short sentence, or a phrase that expresses or shows what a person believes in. The motto the surfmen were repeating, it's a short phrase or it's a short sentence that shows what they believe in. So what's their motto? You have to go out, but you don't have to come back. They have to go out to save people, but they don't have to come back. There is nothing that could guarantee. They are not even sure that they will survive or they will come back. So it's very risky. They are really risking their life in order to save people. How is the motto of the surfmen shows the dangers that they face? Actually, the motto is saying that the surfmen are required to go out and work to save people, but it's not guaranteed that they will survive the danger and make it back to the boat. Yes, they are required to go out. We are not, but they themselves are not sure that if they will survive and if they will make it back to the boat. So actually the motto, it shows the dangers they face, and that's why Nathan realized that he may not be able to do as they do. And now the strategy that you are going to apply, our target strategy, infer and predict. What is to infer and predict? What is the meaning of to infer and to predict? To infer is to understand something that's not directly mentioned by the author. To understand something that's not directly said by the author, how the readers use the details and the characters' actions to infer. So basically, to infer is to understand something that is not said by the author by using the details and the characters' actions. On the other hand, what is to predict? To predict is to use the text details to determine what might happen next in the story. To use the details and the information in the text to guess or to determine what might happen next in the story. What can you predict at this point of the story? Nathan said that he had the realization that he would never be able to do what these men were doing. What can you predict from that information or from this detail? What can we predict at this point? We can't predict whether Nathan will become a surfman or not, but because, as the text said before, he studied medical books, we can predict that he's going to help in the rescue somehow. He's going to help save these people's lives somehow, but we are not sure if he's ever gonna be a surfman or not. Next page. As the rescue started, Nathan realized that there was no time for him to be sorry because he will not be able to be a surfman or to cry over her loss. Nathan realized that he is here to help. He held one of the ropes. Then he looked at the ship. Mr. Meekins and Mr. Pooh were almost there. They have almost made it to the ship. They were very close. he heard another cheer from the men on the ship. Mr. Meekins was swinging the rope and throwing the rope on the deck of the ship, and then the sailors have to tie the rope to the ship. After that, the life-saving crew were hauling the rope back in. They were pulling the rope back, and the surfmen now, Mr. Meekins and Mr. Pooh, are supposed to be carrying one of the sailors back to the beach and go back to the water to bring others. As Nathan was looking at Mr. Meekins and Mr. Pooh, he couldn't see the sailor that they were supposed to be rescuing between them. So he kept asking himself what was more important than a sailor that Mr. Meekins had to bring first. Let's take a look at this sentence. The men were paying out the ropes. The author said, man the ropes at the previous page, at the start of the previous page, and the men were paying out the ropes. What do these terms mean in the story? During the rescue or during saving these people, the men on the beach, they control the ropes, they hold the ropes. So to pay out the ropes is to let them become straight and long, to allow someone tied to the rope to move. To pay the rope is to let the rope become straight and to let it become long, to allow the person that is tied to the rope to move in the water and come back. To man the ropes is to have someone hold and control the ropes. So when you ask someone to man the ropes, you actually ask him to control it and to hold it. And now let's apply our target strategy to infer and to predict. What can you infer or predict at this point of the story? Let's read this part one more time. Soon we were hauling the rope back in. The surfmen would be carrying one of the sailors between them now. I squinted into the spray. Where was the rescued sailor? So Nathan was asking himself, where was the sailor? Mr. Meekins and Mr. Pooh were on their way back, bringing something from the wrecked ship, without a third man between them. Mr. Meekins was carrying something a little larger than a lily gun, something that is small, not an adult person, of course. So what can you infer and predict at this point of the story? Let's start with inferring. I can understand that the surfman, Mr. Meekins, is doing something unexpected. Nathan was expecting him to bring back a sailor. So I can infer that he's doing something unexpected by carrying something else instead of helping another sailor. What can you predict? I can predict that whatever he is carrying, it must be more important to Nathan and to the story. It must be more important that Mr. Meekins decided to bring